Hello, today I'd like to talk to you about playing white if you're a king pawn player, an e4 player, and I'm going to lead you towards, if I may, the Scotch game, Scotch 4 Knights game in fact, and generally going for isolated queen pawn positions if you can against everything else. The main thing I think is to get you to think about, after e4, e5, not playing old stodge. Old stodge is where it's properly called the gioco pianissimo, this sort of thing, as white. And the trouble with this is that your rooks in the corners don't get to take part in the game for a long while, and the games tend to be a bit dull and stodgy and blocked and all the things that you probably won't enjoy about a chess game. You might think it's safe and you know it, but I promise you it's not safe and you don't know it. So let's think about some more sensible ways of playing. These moves are sort of okay, and then I want you to try to think about opening a file. And the easiest way to open a file is with d4. Now this is the Scotch game, so why not go for that? If you're not going to do that, the gioco piano, which means quiet game, is a bit more of a lively game if you play c3 with the idea that you're going to follow it up by playing d4 and try and dominate the centre, and maybe some lines will get open, and you're playing proper fighting chess and black might fall over. Another way of playing for the same sort of thing is the Evans Gambit, where the idea is that if black takes, you give up a pawn, so you pay with a pawn to get ahead in your plan to play d4, and this is also an exciting sort of game, and one that I hope you'd enjoy. The other big opening for white is the Rai Lopez, or the Ri Lopez I think it's supposed to be called, but everybody says Rai Lopez. And after this, this is a very complicated deep opening, but one plan for white again is to castle, play rook e1 and play c3, stop your knight being pinned, and then play d4, and lots of the main lines of the Rai Lopez start with this. So generally I'm encouraging you, if you're not going to play the Scotch game as I recommend, just try and do something to support d4 as an opening idea. Okay, if we pursue our ideas about playing the Scotch, so knight f3, knight c6 is the most natural move. There are other ways for black to play on move 2, and we'll look at those in a separate video. d4, e takes d4. Now white has got as white you've got a couple of choices here. I recommend that you play knight takes d4, but if you fancy trying to trick your opponent one day, you can play bishop to c5, which is a fine way of playing, and less fine but also interesting is the Goering Gambit with c3. So we'll play knight takes d4. Black has got two main replies and a lot of minor ones. Black can play here in this position knight to f6, which is the one of the two main ideas, and the other one is bishop to c5, so that's what we'll be spending most of our time talking about. But there's also queen h4, which tries to steal a pawn, bishop b4 check, queen to f6, g6, and knight g7. So all sorts of ways of playing this for black, but I say the main ones are either bishop to c5 or knight to f6. After knight to f6, there's a big main line that the grandmasters play, which is knight takes c6, b takes c6, and e5. It's the Mies variation, named after Jacques Mies, who I think was Britain's first grandmaster. Anyhow, splendid chap, lived a very long while and played chess to a very high standard. Mies variation, and so just to give an example of why I don't particularly want you to start playing this. Black usually plays a very odd move, Queen E7, blocking the bishop. White replies in kind, and then Knight D5, and then White makes an enormous number of pawn moves, B6, F4, and so on. I mean, other moves can be played, but the two things that you sort of learn about the opening as you get into it are don't move your queen too soon in the opening, leave your pieces free to develop, don't make too many pawn moves, and this breaks all of them. I mean, if you're a grandmaster, you know that you can and you should probably break all of those opening moves, opening rules at some point or another. But I think this is just this is a bit too much too fast. So instead of knight takes c6 on move 5, I recommend you play knight to c3, which is a very easy move to understand. This is called a Scotch 4 knights game, and that's what will be the subject of the next video.